All right, let's get started. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining us on this exciting webinar. Um, I have with me two dear friends, but also accomplished leaders in their own fields. And I think we are going to have a very, very exciting discussion on something which is as fundamental as the future of work. So in this, obviously, we will be talking about what is happening with hybrid, what is going on with the employee mindset, things that are changing on the technology side and how that might be driving change. And the whole raging debate right now is whether the technological disruptions are going to be net job positive or they are going to destroy jobs. Essentially, um, and then uh, clearly the future of jobs itself and the future of skills that are required for the jobs of the future, that is a big question mark. And then finally, we will also discuss what should we be doing about it. And there are four major stakeholders. Um, it's the governments, the educational ecosystems, employers, and employees. So I think we have a very exciting 1 hour in front of us. Before I get on to how we have laid out the agenda for this webinar today, let me introduce my two panelists and two speakers. First is Mohit Tukral. Mohit is the CEO of Arise. It's a very large company, or let me say a very large startup in the US. It's basically a virtual platform that connects businesses to leading brands worldwide. Mohit is the founder and managing partner of Wivthera. He was a very senior executive at Genpact earlier, was also on the NASSCOM Executive Council, very passionate about the education sector, on the advisory board of edX, and co-founder and trustee of Plaksha University. Welcome, Mohit.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you.
Our second speaker is Dr. Pramath Raj Sinha. I think I can take the entire webinar, the next 30 minutes talking about Pramath. He has just so many accomplishments and so many hats he wears. But just in summary, he's the founder of Harappa Education, which is now part of Upgrad. And it's basically in the skilling area and preparing young people for the 21st century workplace. Uh, Pramath has been a founder and managing director of the 9.9 Group. He was probably 25 years back the person who thought about ISB and went on to become the founding dean of ISB. And of course, he was very instrumental in the first 10 years in setting up that institution. And he's also a co-founder and trustee of Ashoka University with a very deep understanding in education strategy and institution building. So welcome, Pramath.
Ashish, it's great to be back here and great to be here with Mohit. All three of us won a similar webinar not so long ago, so it's deja vu.
Yes,
thank you.
That's true.
All right. So in terms of the flow that we have today, for the next 5-7 minutes, I will just set the context, talk about a few trends that I highlighted. And then after this, hand it over to Pramath, who will essentially talk about, amongst other things, the role of governments and educational institutions in solving this big puzzle and this uncertainty that all of us are facing around what could governments do, what should educational institutions do to shape the future of work. After that, I'll invite Mohit to talk about, from an employer's perspective and an employee's perspective, what are the dynamics, what's happening with org structures, what's happening with the role of HR, and from an employee perspective, the whole gig economy, and changing mindsets of employees and so on. And then towards the latter half of the webinar, we will keep a lot of time, maybe 25 minutes for Q&A. So with that as a agenda, let me dive into some of the points that I wanted to make. So before that, may I request my colleague Arun to launch the first poll, and please fill out this poll, um, and let's give 30 seconds. Yeah, so you will have 30 seconds to fill this out. So the two questions here are, the first is, what is the work model followed at your organization? Just choose one of these options. The second question is, what is the biggest challenge for management in a hybrid work setup? I think we can probably put out the results. All right, not surprisingly, the first option of the first question is the most voted one, where the 3 days in office and the 2 days at home. That option is at least in this sample, that is the one which is followed the most. And in the second question, the biggest challenge the top two challenges is around collaboration and how does one monitor productivity. Great. So with that, maybe we can go to my first slide. So not surprisingly, basically the point I wanted to make here is that hybrid is here to stay. And if you look at these trends in the bar chart, in 2022, about 30% of companies had hybrid working. In 2024, that number has gone up to 44%. And the forecast is that over the next 2 years, that number will further go up to 77%, which is basically that hybrid is here to stay and it will only accelerate. If you look at some of these statistics, global hybrid work adoption is expected to rise, with 78% of employers saying globally that this adoption of hybrid will only go up. In APAC, this sentiment is at around 77%. However, there is a slight tension between employers and employees. If you look at the statistic, leaders, managers, they would rather have their teams and employees being in office, whereas employees at this stage are saying, look, I'm happy with the pay cut, but I want this flexibility. I want the ability to maybe spend 40% of my time in my job from home, delivering from home. So there is some tension there, and also it gets compounded and more complex because a lot of employers in surveys have said that they have better work, better engagement, and far more motivated employees. 91% of employers are saying this when the hybrid work model is there. So I think there's some mindset changes required, maybe in the way managers and leaders manage their teams and people, but this is something that we can discuss later on. Okay, with that, let me move on to a second poll. And the second poll is really around employee mindset and what has changed over the last few years. So you should just choose one of these four options. What is the factor? What is the biggest factor that influences your decision to continue in your job? Is it compensation and benefits? Is it work-life balance and flexibility? Is it career growth opportunities, or it is purpose and impact? All right, Arun, if you can show us the results. Wow. So not surprising to a large extent, clearly work-life balance and flexibility comes out to be the top factor, and then followed by career growth opportunities. Compensation and benefits, it is what it is. I'm a bit surprised with purpose and impact because some of the things that we have been evaluating and researching, the purpose part of it came out to be very big. Some of the research that we have done suggests, if we can move to the next slide, that from the traditional employee motivators, and Pramath and Mohit, in our younger days, some of these used to be the biggest motivators for people to stay inside organizations, whether it was job security, career progression, and salary was obviously very, very important. But in today's world, purpose-driven work. So some research that we did, a report said that there is a 58% reduction in retention, which is caused by general unfulfillment and a lack of purpose and not being able to see the impact of your work in a workplace. Second, diversity and inclusion, big motivator. And of course, the survey showed us, the poll showed us flexible working arrangements, and then of course the traditional values and culture. And of course, well-being and mental health is emerging as a big factor as well. Moving on, the third and final poll for the evening. This is around technology, and it's a very simple question. Do we think that AI in the longer term would be will create net jobs or will destroy net jobs? In the sense that would the number of jobs in the world go down or go up because of AI? If you can please quickly choose your option. Can we publish? So, okay, it's a bit of a toss-up between new jobs, net new jobs versus, at 40% and 37% said that most likely more jobs will not be created and more jobs will be displaced. All right, so some of the research that we have done on this particular aspect is essentially, of course, we have Gen AI, we have cloud computing, we have Internet of Things, a lot of these things, and there are, of course, a lot of other things which are coming up, whether it's quantum computing, whether it's blockchain, and so on. If we go on to the next slide, so this is a toss-up. If you look at the bottom part of this slide, there are a lot of jobs which are just going away, which are getting automated away, which are getting AI'd away, if I may use that term. But on the other hand, a lot of these technological developments are leading to new kind of jobs coming up, whether it's in the cybersecurity area, big data, analytics. So it's really, is it going to be glitters for us? Is it going to be jitters for us? The implication of all of this is that we need huge amounts of skilling, reskilling, upskilling, and some kinds of X-skilling, what I call. We don't know. There's an X factor there. There's an uncertainty there. What will be the skills of the future, even 5 years from now, that will be needed? Of course, the attitudinal stuff, being lifelong learners, the ability to collaborate on the cloud, really. How do you do that? Team dynamics. And then from a leadership perspective, how do you manage this ecosystem? How do you, do training maybe? How do you do a variety of different things that we have all assumed to be a given, right? Which brings me to my final slide. So essentially, all of us in the world need to now get together and figure this out. So who are the main four stakeholders? Obviously, governments. There's huge amounts of policy making. We need to do impact analysis of policies. So what should governments do about this uncertainty and the next 10, 20 years of jobs and the future of work? Similarly, educational institutions now, there are a lot of modern forward-looking educational institutions who have a view on this, and they are They are creating ecosystems and curriculums and experiential learning to cater to the future of work and the future of workers as such. From an employee and employer perspective, again, a lot of different aspects that need to be determined. How should companies think about org structures? How should they think about the HR role? How should they think about training? And there's so many different aspects to this. And from an individual employee perspective, how should I face the future? What should I do today such that beyond lifelong learning, I know lifelong learning is a much used term. How should I prepare for the future? So these were some of the high-level thoughts that I wanted to present. But now is a great time for me to hand it over to Pramath. And Pramath, as we had discussed earlier, it will be great to get your perspectives on the first two elements of this. From a government standpoint, and you work very closely with different state governments and also with the central government in India. Um, how should a government think about it, and especially from an Indian perspective, where the dynamics of this whole issue might be substantially different from the rest of the world? And second, educational institutions, again, how does an Ashoka think about it, or a Plaksha think about it, or any educational ecosystem or a Harappa think about it? So over to you, Pramath.
Yeah, thanks, Ashish. You put me on the spot a little bit, Ashish, because this is all happening so fast. I don't know if Mohit also feels the same way. That it's hard to say anything definitive or something that you feel sure about, and that makes me nervous about making remarks about something that is evolving so quickly. But I will still attempt to do that because it may spark a discussion. So let's take governments first and foremost. A very interesting meeting I'm coming from in the Ministry of Home Affairs, and this is a bit of an aside and a dark joke, but not it's a dark reality. The meeting was about skilling and about what's happening to youth in our country. Apparently, Cambodia is a country where you can go and get visa on arrival. So what is happening is that, I don't know if any of you have received these emails. I got one recently which said that the CBI is investigating you. We are going to file a case against you if you don't respond to this email. Please call up at this number. They send a very authentic looking email with lots of government numbers and references. And there's actually a certificate type thing that comes, which looks like it's from the CBI. Of course, if you are a bit knowledgeable, you'll see that the research and analysis wing is not part of CBI, and there's all kinds of stuff in there which is completely focus. But where I'm going with this is that it's apparently coming from from Cambodia, and there are big scam. What did they call it? Scam tents or scam houses that have been created, and these are engineers from India, educated engineers and data scientists and computer trained engineers from India who are being shipped there. And they are running these large scam programs for the world. And the MHA is stuck because they don't know what to do about it, right? Because they are scamming Indians. So they are obviously committing a crime. But equally, these are gullible young Indians who have been persuaded to go to Cambodia. So it's actually not their fault. And they're willing to come back if the Indian government could enable them to come back. But there are equally some people who are saying, we don't want to go back because I'm getting paid and this is a good life and it's a job. So I'm happy here. So anyway, this shows you how one of the things that is going to happen with AI and jobs and this hybrid remote working and so on is some of the dark consequences of technology also, which right now some arms of the government are very concerned about. I couldn't imagine that, there was this television series called Jam Tara or something where they were scamming these with these SIM cards. This has gone to another level from that. But coming back to your point, I think there is a point to this. I think one of the problems is that we don't have enough jobs in our country. And I think this whole thing of AI, while on the face of it, it would seem that it's actually destroying jobs and could destroy jobs. I think it creates a huge opportunity as well. If you look at what the Radha and Deepak Basu of the Anudeep Foundation do, they are actually working with large-scale rural women and people who just have a high school education and training them to tag data intelligently so that they can actually provide the hard data that learning and algorithms have to feed on, right? And so on. So I think the government has to creatively think about not just what is going to get destroyed, but also what is going to get created. And how do we work backwards from that demand to create the skilling? It's almost like NSDC 2.0, right? In the old days, the NSDC guys said, okay, you need so many hospitality professionals. I think NSDC almost needs a new skill council, and you could almost create a new NSDC for AI. Okay. So I think that's number one. I think the curriculum in our schools needs to change. See, even today, not everybody is taught digital skills across our university system. I think we should just leapfrog and teach everybody AI skills, right? And understand what is AI and how does it affect and how can you use it and leverage it. I mean, I am constantly using both AI for search and AI for my documents and so on. And I think everybody needs to learn how to do that. And we cannot wait decades. It should be just hammered into school and college curriculums. Instead of saying digital, let's just go all the way to. And I know this sounds a little bit like flavor of the month and hype, but it's here to stay, that we know. I mean, it may not deliver the value that everybody is promising immediately, but it's tomorrow going to become like Google search. And you can't be digitally literate in today's world if you're not going to know how to use it. So I think that's the second thing, that curriculums and programs need to change. This has to become as basic as learning language and math. And my third point is that I think the government itself needs to start using this at large scale. I mean, the government itself is a large employer. The government itself is a large deployer of services. Many years ago, when I did my PhD, Ashish, I actually worked on computer vision. And I think it's amazing how Digi Yatra works, right? I mean, it's actually using some of the old algorithms that I wrote 30 years ago that could not work in real time. Today, it's actually recognizing your face, and you upload your boarding card. And in many airports now, you don't even have to scan the boarding pass again. You can just walk and your face gets recognized and you're through. I think there's tremendous opportunity for the government itself to use AI in our system. And the one point I missed is on the second point about changing the curriculum. I think what China has done is really gone whole hog in making sure that there are specialist AI programs that universities are offering, and a lot of money is being invested in AI research. I think the challenge I think we have, and what I worry about, which I think the government needs to really wake up to, and a lot of people are talking about this, is that anyway, we've lost the lead on many things which is innovative in science and technology to the United States. Now we are losing that game to China. And I think that somewhere we do have the brains in our country. We just need to create a cluster of people together who can work on these issues and make get to the cutting edge in at least some areas. Let's not again miss the bus, because I think the bus has not left the station, but soon what will happen is people will get so far ahead that we just won't be able to. So I think my three points are really to make sure that that we bring in AI into everything and see it as an opportunity, one on the skilling side, one on the education side, and one on the bringing AI into government itself. That's the government part. And very quickly to wrap up my segment, on the education part, the corollary is that all of us in education have to make all our students absolutely AI literate. Both the information and the misinformation about AI, what AI cannot do. right? I think a lot of people are imagining things that AI can do and realizing that hallucinations are also real, and that you should at least understand what inaccuracies and what errors and drastic errors can creep into AI if you don't watch. So, what are the hazards of AI, and what are the things that you must be aware of, and also a little bit about the ethics of AI. I think we are going to get really into trouble if people start seeing AI as the kind of Cambodia opportunity, right? That you can scam people sitting somewhere in the world, and that's actually a legitimate opportunity for an educated professional. So I do think that making people, every student, aware of, it's almost like in school. I went to a Jesuit school. I was taught moral science. You almost need to teach the do's and don'ts of AI, and what it can and cannot do to every student, because it really does affect your life. Even if you're not going to work in AI, discerning whether this webinar is for real, is this the real Pramath Sinha speaking or is some avatar speaking? You don't know.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be important for people to know that. I think the second part is that uh, the education itself is, I think education is a case study in how AI is going to transform it. And I think we are going to have to change completely. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you don't need to teach anymore. And people will think that I'm being completely sort of again getting carried away with the flavor of the month and the pocket and going the herd mentality. But I do really think that students will not need to learn in the way that they have been learning so far, and so thinking deeply about what new learning capabilities you build into students going forward is going to be very important. It's almost like you need to know language, but you don't need to learn language as accurately as we were taught, because you can always get help. Today, if I've never been taught Sanskrit, but if I want to write in Sanskrit, I can write. I can communicate with somebody in Sanskrit if I want in real time, and that's crazy, right? I mean, without learning Sanskrit, I can speak to somebody, and Sanskrit may seem an archaic language, but whether it's Portuguese or Spanish or Chinese and so on. So I do think that people need to understand what are the meta skills that they need in this new world to educate themselves, because education itself is changing. And by the way, teachers also need to understand what will they do with their teaching. So it's not just the recipient of the education, but the person who are delivering, and therefore educational institutions need to evolve that. And the last thing I will say to the point about these three things, that I think students are very confused about where the opportunities lie for the future. So it's one thing to educate them, it's one thing to build their skills about how they will learn, but I think people are really confused about where the world is going. And I think as educational institutions, it's hard to look too far into the future, but I think getting people to understand that, somebody's asking the question, will AI replace human jobs entirely? I think people are a little bit lost as to what's really going to happen in the future. And if you can't predict too far, but at least if you can predict what's going to happen 2, 3, 4 years out as they graduate, and get them to understand the implications, it's a slightly different point from the earlier points I made, but it's an important point because I see students getting really spooked about what's going to happen to their future. So I'll stop there. Sorry, but I tried to cover both pieces for you, but I'll stop there and hand it back to you.
Yeah, wonderful, Pramath. And, we already have some questions. I also have a few basic questions. I'll come back to you. With that, over to you, Mohit, and maybe 6, 7 minutes, Mohit. Let's catch up a little bit. And, the two perspectives, the employer's perspective and the employee's perspective, and Pramath alluded to that, students, they are a bit confused. I'm sure employees are confused. So, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah. So I think Pramath covered, always, he's on the money, to the point on a bunch of things. If you look at, look, a lot of you talked about hybrid. I think hybrid is here to stay. We also believe that the gig economy is going to be a part of the future. In India, for example, about 20, 30 million people are gig workers. That is going to become 3 times of what it is in the next 5 years. In the US, is 30 million gig workers, is going to be double to 60 million, right? So the gig working space is really growing. I think the big question from to be asked by employees and then people who come and work and then employers, I think it's a balance that everybody has to really think through. So let me talk about how employers across the industry, and as I talk to more and more people, are thinking, right? I think what is driving what we need to be careful and drive as we build the hybrid structures or gig working is around how do you really drive deep focus on culture, right? I think culture is going to be a very strong bed of how organizations need to drive. And with the ingestion of AI and technology, how do you think about culture within the organization is going to become being big, right? And Ashish, you talked about diversity, you talked about diversity, and then there was this whole in the survey about collaboration. I think employers worry about how do you really take global diverse talent locally, globally, and how do you really leverage that talent? And collaboration is another big thing in terms of how do you really make collaborate and innovate, right? Innovation sometimes is always driven by collaboration. And I think that's the other big fix that organizations have to do. And look, the way the work will happen and happens even today, and a lot of you might be doing it is getting very, I won't use the word compartmentalized, but it's really becoming very skill based, right? So I have an agile work environment that we might be working, certain task and activities being done by somebody within the organization, and then the next level of task and activities being done by somebody else in the organization. So how do you want to make sure that that agile working continues to be very relevant, and in the same breath as you ingest AI and technology in what you do and take some of the work that people do out of the system, whether it's 25-30%. You look, there is various views on life that 80% of what we do will get eliminated and 25% will get eliminated. I personally think it's that 20 to 30% of the work that happens today will get eliminated and more work and opportunities will get created. So how organizations are designed for that is going to be very critical. So to Pramad's earlier point, this is moving so fast that it's not that it's very going to be very constant, and all organizations will have to be smarter and very agile to do things as they go forward. I think I truly believe, and if you look at all the work that has happened, the human in the loop will always be there. Organizations will need people to do certain things. Aeroplanes today can actually fly without a pilot, land and fly, but you still have pilots and pilots getting trained, and there's scarcity of pilots in the world today, right? Airlines have cut down flying planes because they don't have pilots post-COVID. People moved on to do other things in life, right? So I think the human in the loop will always be there, and organizations have to adjust employers have to adjust the organization to keep that human in the loop in terms of how that the delivery of the work that they're doing for their customers or internally for themselves will continue to happen. So I think that's one bucket of the employer angle, right? Then as you move to the employees, and a lot of us and a lot of you and who either have companies or who have employees, I think it's going to be a constant learning curve. 25-30% of the people in your organizations, or maybe even more, will have to either reskill or you'll have to just change them around. So it's not going to be the constant world of, if I had somebody in my organization working for 30 years, and if they don't reskill and change, you'll have to change them. And that's the brutal reality of life. And I think as employees or as individuals who work in organizations, we'll have to constantly reskill ourselves with new technology, with new as things change and the future of work changes, right? And if you go back to the 2023 study of World Economic Forum, they talked about the new work that is emerging that people need to really skill themselves up to. And the type of activity will be different, right? Whether it is on large language models, whether it is even in manufacturing, whether it's IoT devices really driving certain behavior. But I think some of that new tech people will have to learn, whether in whichever industry you are in, right? It doesn't have to be IT services and manufacturing and everywhere else, right? So I think you have to be really getting skilling yourself very differently. All of us have to learn every day as employees, and it has to change. And I think the mindset will have to change of how do you work in a more collaborative world, because you're working in a hybrid environment or a total work from home gig environment. And I think that is going to be how we wire ourselves, and how we as individuals think about working will definitely change. Also, remember, all of this doesn't come with risks, inherent risks in life for employers and employees. Cybersecurity will become such a big concern. And I think Pramod shared with that example, right? These young engineers get pulled into these countries which are driving certain wrong behavior. So cybersecurity and us securing our environments and securing our networks is going to be very important. Vulnerability on today on data and security is going to be like drastically very different the way it has been done. I do believe for people who work and people who look at employment and look at the future, net job creation will happen. And I'll tell you why. And I think somebody put a message on, there's a in the chat, somebody talked about annotation or something, right? I mean, if you go back, there was no Facebook 15 years ago. And Facebook, when it came, or Google or YouTube or these things, right? Content moderation became such a big business for companies, where today large IT, BPO services companies and data science companies have billions and billions of dollars of revenue driving data annotation and content moderation, in spite of the AI engine driving 99% of the match, and then 1-2% is getting thrown out, and has created different level of opportunities. So as we ingest AI, the type of work that we will do will change. Now, I can't predict what that type of work will be, but I'm just giving you a very example of the last 10 years of where social media has created this animal which has thrown out the requirement by governments and companies to be compliant to drive content moderation, right? And that has created opportunities for tech and services companies, like I said. So I think we'll create net new opportunities will be created. What those opportunities are and how do we quickly adapt and skill for those opportunities is going to be very important. So the institutions like Pramod talked about, whether it is the government or the state or the universities and the employers, will have to work together to make sure that that new skill is getting completely, those two are very connected in some way, so that a lot of people who are employed have their ability to skill and learn both from an education institute and from the employers who are employing them. So I think that shift is going to happen. So it's going to be very interesting to watch the next 2-3 years. But I can just say, look, there's a lot of chatter on AI. There's a lot of really good work that is happening, but use cases are very, very hard today to build, right? The cost of building use cases is very hard. So I think the next 2 years are going to be superbly defining of how we are using AI. And I think AI is going to be embedded in services and healthcare in every place. But I think how we wire ourselves and train ourselves and work with that new environment of cultural shift, innovation, AI is going to be very important as how we think about as individuals. So Ashish, back to you.
Thank you so much, Mohit. Very, very insightful. So we have about 20 minutes left, and there is a whole host of questions in the Q&A window. I also have a few questions. Maybe I'll just try and interweave this very efficiently. So Pramath, maybe a few questions for you. Let me just pose three for starters.
Sure.
First, do you believe AI is going to impact the future of work in India? almost at the same level as it would impact developed economies? That's one question. Second, what advice would you give to parents? Somebody asked about liberal arts education evolving. The parents' mindset might still be a little bit warped in time. I mean, there's in India, I'm talking about, where they still might be saying, ki IIT se degree kar lo, ya, do whatever. But they themselves, and as all of us are struggling. So, what would be your advice to parents? And the third question, really, why don't you answer those two, and I'll just choose the
Yeah,
best.
I think Ashish, I definitely think that it will affect us as much as anywhere else in the world. But I do think that the good news is that it's not going to affect all jobs. I mean, there's still a very big part of the traditional economy that will need people working in traditional ways, which are not going to be affected by AI. So I think that we are that much more robust as an overall economy, I feel, just because we are where we are as a country, whether it's agriculture jobs or manufacturing jobs, or, core sector jobs, infrastructure jobs. But yes, the jobs that are digitally disrupted or digitally impact, and I take the point about annotation that was mentioned and Mohit was mentioning, though if you talk to the Anudeep guys, they see the next version of what they are doing coming. So I do think that those will be impacted and they will be impacted in the same level as around the world. I don't think today there's that much of a difference. We've seen that in different sectors. The level of services, the level of opportunities, the level of quality of services as quickly coming into India and sometimes even more enhanced than what you see in other parts of the world. So I have no doubt about it. I think to parents, I would say that, listen, the core education of a liberal arts education is still important. In fact, it's to some extent even more important now. When we created Harappa, we're really creating the liberal arts model of professional education or what people would need to learn, which they didn't learn in college, right? Which was thinking, communication, all that. I think those skills are even more valuable to. So I would say that you need to go back to the more fundamental skills. These are we sometimes call civilizational skills, which you need as human beings, which we are actually killing in our schools and colleges. I think you need that. I think the domain skills that had become a big part of our education perhaps need to be de-emphasized because and people need to be taught AI, and that's what I would tell parents. It's an uphill battle because parents are still connecting jobs to domain skills.
Right, right. All right, great. So,
But I can over to you.
sorry, why don't you please? I missed that. If you want to finish your thought.
No, I finished my thought. I think something happened to my Zoom call, but I'm
Okay.
done.
Okay. Okay. All right. Mohit, question for you. Very, very comforting to see you say that work will only increase in the world, right? It's not that, and hence jobs will increase. Could you just maybe say a little bit more about that? Because I think everybody is looking for that comfort.
I'm just going back the past, right? I mean, I'm saying how past sometimes defines how things could look in the future, right? Because there are certain things we do today, which we never did, right? So even if you go back to the early 60s and 70s, people, or even later, people talk about automation of homes, right? And we all automated homes, but the work activity and what you do still didn't go down, right? I mean, so I do think that AI will drive and change and accelerate research, whether in healthcare, will accelerate our ability, maybe eliminate certain jobs that you talked about, the low-hanging fruits kind of will go away faster. I personally believe that if you go back a few years, we all talked about robotic process automation, which we said that will disrupt and 20% of what we do will go away. And if you look at historical data over the 10 years, 5-10% of that has really got impacted. AI, in my view, is very different because it's learning from us as humans. and will change things, but I think there will be more opportunities created, right? Ashish, I don't know what those new opportunities would be, but I do think that any disruption changes and creates more opportunities, right? I mean, we move from locomotive engines to electric engines and power. All those things which changed over years created more opportunities, right? And human minds are, which will create more opportunities, do more things. There'll be more things which will happen where people will be required to do those activities. My only point there would be, what you get skilled in the past, that skill, what you have to have is going to be different. What has to be taught in education institutes will have to be different, right? So I think I truly believe that it will create more opportunities than we all think they want. Now, how much of that net positive it will be, I don't know, but I don't think so it'll be a net negative. Short term, yes, definitely. Long term, if you look at it, it will not be.
Sure, sure. Great. There is I'm going to combine a few questions that are there in the Q&A window. So somebody anonymous is asking, uh, will the increased role of gig work lead to a decrease in the average size of organization? That one question. But I think the bigger question is the second one, which this person is raising. Are we going to see a massive explosion of outsourcing? And India, given its population, given its education standards, and all the other dynamics and the competitive advantage that we have as a nation, do you think there is, over the next 10, 20 years, offshoring to India and outsourcing in general is going to explode?
Yeah, look, I think globalization of workforce will continue to happen, right? So outsourcing, offshoring, nearshoring, whatever you want to call it, is going to increase, whether it's in tech services, whether it's in manufacturing, or whether it's in IT, ITS, and data, right? So it'll happen. Again, the type of work that will happen in India or the type of work could happen in any other country will be very, very different. So there is a certain work that happens today, let's say in India in the BPO and IT space, some of that is getting eliminated, right? I mean, uh, DevOps, some of that things are really changing in how you ingest technology. I mean, we talked about this whole thing about content and annotation and all that. Some of that will change, and how our technology is going to drive things. So the more work around digital, cloud, data science, data analytics, you know, and where there has to be a human in the loop, whether it's in healthcare. When I say healthcare, not like research healthcare, but back office healthcare and technology. Some of those things will continue to evolve. So I do think that there will be continue to drive growth. I think right now, if you look at data for most companies, is muted and flat. It is all because like a lot of us on this call and outside this call are thinking, what is AI going to do to us, right? And as that gets clearer, people will start defining, okay, what needs to now get done, right? Because you don't want to do anything and then suddenly you get disrupted. So I think everybody's like waiting and watching as to what AI is doing, and then how that will then drive the further push and momentum to any outsourcing and offshoring and nearshoring in the future. So I do think that it will continue to grow. And you're seeing that in GCCs in India, which are these global capability centers, they continue to grow at about 10 to 12% in India at least, right? So which means that those companies who have their own captives are continuing to grow them and moving work from their base countries to India in a big way.
Great. Pramad, do you have a perspective on this? Assuming, which I don't think anybody is doubting, that the next 10, 20 years, we can have a massive explosion of offshoring to India. Any perspectives on that? We can't hear you, Pramad, or at least I can't hear you. Mohit, can you hear Pramad?
No, I can't hear him.
Okay.
You might have to log in, log back. Why
Yeah,
don't you?
he was saying. That was he was saying. No, excellent. So, there was one more question for you, Mohit, in the chat window. Let me bring that up. Pramath, you're back?
Yes, I do think that there's going to be massive growth. Uh,
Yeah.
I am where Mohit is. I think new forms of outsourcing and offshoring are going to evolve out of all this. We will have to obviously scale up for that, but I do think it's going to grow. I'm more actually also maybe it was away from this topic of AI so much, but I think the globalization of the workforce that Mohit mentioned, I think is going to be huge also. You're going to see large scale migration of Indians to the rest of the world, including my Cambodia example, though that was a dark example. But in core sectors, you're going to see a lot of people go around the world as the world ages. So I think it's going to be a combination of technology-based outsourcing and offshoring, but also a lot of movement and migration because of the the, the need for uh, traditional jobs around the world, given what is happening with the demographic cliff in the West.
Right. Yeah, so globalization of workforce and globalization of work itself, right? I mean, just services being globalized from anywhere in the world. Sameem, Ghaffar, thank you for telling us that UAE actually has a Ministry of AI. And then there is a, so Pramath, you talked about, obviously the government has a big role to play, when it comes to AI adoption for themselves, and then creating that regulatory framework and so on. Any perspectives on regulations around AI? What should that be, top one or two?
See,
Because
in
there was
any
this data
news.
privacy thing which has come in India. A lot of corporates are actually complaining about it, maybe for the wrong reasons, but I don't know that. But how do you regulate AI in India? How do you think about it?
So listen, yeah, I don't know. This is out of my league, above my pay grade. But I have worked on regulation and policy in the past in different sectors, and what I know is that policy will always be one step behind. Sorry, we are getting some other noise, and are you hearing that too?
No, it's okay for me,
Are you
Pramath.
hearing any noise?
Yeah, I
No.
am.
Oh,
I am.
okay, sorry, I'm hearing some chatter in the back. Anyway, all I'm saying is, Ashish, that regulation always is one step behind what is actually happening, what will actually happen. So people will do things that are not right or inappropriate, and then regulation will come in. Sometimes government will over regulate, sometimes they will under regulate. It's going to be messy, and it happens in every sector. This has been proven the world over, and I think you'll see a little bit of one step back, two steps forward, to one step back kind of regulatory environment. I don't know exactly what they will do, but this is very typical. This is going to be harder to regulate for various reasons. So I do think that that is going to be the problem. I Your original question was, yeah, see, in that sense, AI is a little bit like IT. The government stayed out of IT, and IT happened. And the joke about the IT industry and the BPO industry is that it happened because the government stayed out.
We lost Pranav.
I don't know what happened today. Now you can't hear me, I suppose. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I think the government can stay out of it and it happen. But I think the where the government has to play a role in, do we want to be leaders in AI in some way or form or not? That's where the government has to intervene. And that comes from making huge investments and strategic priorities in AI as a country. I think that's what I'm concerned about. I think the government doesn't do anything, AI will still happen, just like IT happened.
Right.
But as a country, are we going to make something strategic happen? We missed the semiconductor boom, we missed the manufacturing boom. Are we going to miss the AI boom? Is the question.
Right.
In terms of being the innovator and the leader in the sector.
Right. But it's not a zero-sum game, right? I mean, yeah, obviously other countries will maybe progress faster than us, and we absolutely should not miss this bus. but it's not a zero-sum game, right? I mean, we can still do substantive stuff here over the next few years.
I'm not as optimistic, Ashish, if that's what you're doing. I think this is also a winner takes all kind of game.
Okay.
And if you are ahead, then the one or two players who are ahead will always take the lead in dictating to the world how they should use AI or what applications they should use, what algorithm, and that's what I'm concerned.
Okay. Fair enough. Badri, to answer your question, we absolutely will share the slides and the poll results in an email to everybody who is attending this. Um, Let me see what else. I did have one question for you, and maybe that's the last question for the evening for you, Mohit. You talked about culture in an organization, right? And all of us have known this for decades. As somebody famously said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So it just trumps any kind of things that you would do. What are the issues around culture in today's modern organization of the 21st century?
Look, I think the big challenge, I think the big issue has always been, look, when COVID happened, everybody talked about productivity being 10% more, right? Because nobody could go out. So they had nothing better to do. So they worked more. I think as the hybrid model and more are looking at it, productivity is down, right? It's actually down by 5 to 10% because people who work from home, they're less productive. Like we might hypothetically believe they are more productive, but like if you look at a lot of data, they're less productive. So I think if the culture, if the organized, and if the world has to move to the hybrid, which it came from this survey, came from your report, I think culturally people will have to adapt to the focus around, efficiency and productivity. Two, with AI ingestion, that will further make them be more, either they'll get redundant or they have to really upskill and then, get into the culture of the organization in terms of the constant learning effort, right? And then employers and organizations have to have leadership and talent trained how to manage a more diversified workforce with different skill sets in the future. So that level of leadership training and leadership effectiveness will have to change and become very different, right? And how do you train people remotely? How you manage people remotely will continue to evolve as we go ahead. Yeah. So I think culturally, mindset has to change for the employer and the leaders who manage employees. The employees will have to change as to how they are delivering to tasks and activities on the skills that they have. So I think there is some friction today, but I think there's a lot of work happening by HR companies, organizations, HR departments in companies to really how do you drive and reduce that friction, right? And I think diversity, inclusion, ESG, right? People are very passionate about ESG. All these things will become very important for keeping happy employees and happy employers. So those things will have to change, which we never thought about it when we worked in a very office environment or in a brick and mortar environment.
Right, right. Very great answer, Mohit. I mean, this is such a fascinating discussion, but unfortunately, we are out of time now. So my sort of three takeaways, just to wrap this up. I mean, it was very, very comforting to hear you say, Mohit, that don't worry, guys. Life has always found a way, life will find a way, and next 10, 20 years, we are only going to be a better place. The world is going to be a better place as far as jobs are concerned. However, to Pramak, your point, we require massive, 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 and even more massive AI skilling and training. Start at the school level, colleges, vocational training, NSDC 2.0, all of them great initiatives that need to be taken. And finally, if you put these two things together, then we as a country are sitting at the cusp of a great opportunity for us over the next few decades. whether it's domestically or it's in terms of globalization of workforce and work. So thank you so much, Mohit and Pramath. I thank all the participants and the people who joined. As we log out of the webinar, a short survey as a feedback mechanism will pop up when you are logging out. So please do fill that. It will just make us become better and do better the next webinar. So thank you once again, and hope everybody had a great time in terms of learning in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.